This video is brought to you by Squarespace, the best all-in-one platform for any of your website building needs. Hey guys, it's Celestia, and social media sucks. Breaking news, I know. I think most people can agree that social media as a whole is something that we as a society have accepted as a necessary evil that we love to hate, but also can't stop using. We watch videos and read articles about how harmful social media has the potential to be on those same social media platforms. And not because we're deliberately choosing to be ignorant to that harm, but because we've acknowledged that harm and decided that it's worth it. The use of and even addiction to social media is something that we've collectively come to accept as just another thing that's bad for you, but that you'll inevitably end up using anyway. And that's because for all the harm it does, most agree that the good it does is better. The ability to easily and instantly access and share information, connect with others all over the world, create and consume content, broadcast your ideas and art, build and engage with communities of like-minded people, run entire businesses, get involved with causes you believe in, stay informed on world events. Those are just a few of the hundreds of incredibly valuable things that social media allows us to do with little to no effort at all. It's a tool we'd be fools not to utilize based on that alone. So it comes as no surprise that when we're confronted with its downsides, we're inclined to dismiss or minimize them in favor of its benefits, even when those downsides are significant enough that they could actually hurt us. Artists are no strangers to that. In fact, artists experience those benefits and downsides to an even bigger extreme than most social media users. Platforms like Instagram and Twitter act almost as one big potential gallery for artists, but without the highly selective restrictions placed on who gets to have their work displayed. Anyone can share their art with the whole world and have a chance to get it seen by thousands, something both hobbyists and aspiring professionals in the art community value more than almost anything else. So while most regular users of social media have the luxury of viewing having an account on these platforms as optional, artists kind of don't. While there are obviously exceptions, for the most part, whether you want to make art your career or just build any kind of following that sees and enjoys it, you need to have social media, because there is no alternative tool available to connect your art with the people that you want to see it, at least not to that degree. Artists reap more benefits from social media than a regular user, but they're also not only faced with more downsides, they're forced to accept them even when they don't want to. Most people can say, okay, you know what? I don't want to deal with the constant negativity, doom scrolling, and drama of social media. It's not worth it to me. I'll delete my account. But any artist who wants to share their work in a way that actually reaches anyone doesn't have that luxury. Social media is the only real, feasible way to do that these days, so we're effectively chained to it even if we don't feel those downsides are worth it. Now, obviously, artists aren't the only ones in this position. There are a lot of people who don't want to put up with all of the ways that social media makes their lives worse and want to delete their accounts, but can't because it offers them one specific thing that nothing else can, be that access to a community they couldn't contact otherwise, a following that they feel validated by and maybe even financially supported by, the ability to spread awareness about causes they're passionate about, take your pick. But the motivation artists have is so inherently personal. We put so much of ourselves into our art, and that passion and love for it motivates us to want to share it. So when the only real way we can involves using something inherently toxic and harmful, that's going to have uniquely damaging effects on not just us as artists, but our relationship with art itself. In today's video, I'm going to discuss those effects. More specifically, the cycle I've observed and experienced in which artists begin to associate their self-worth and the quality of their work with how much engagement it gets on social media, start trying to make more and more art to get that engagement so they can feel valid as artists, and become dependent on likes in order to feel good about the work they make while also only making work to get likes. Essentially, how social media gets artists addicted to making art by training us to depend on engagement for self-esteem, and therefore make as much art as possible so we can get it by pleasing algorithms that only reward constant posting. How this addiction to art corrupts the creative process, and how we as individuals can try to avoid falling victim to it ourselves. But first, let me take a moment to thank today's sponsor, Squarespace, a longtime partner of the channel. As regular viewers of my channel know very well by now, Squarespace is my favorite website building and hosting platform, and in my opinion is the best one out there no matter what kind of website you want to make. And I can say that with confidence because I've literally built everything from a professional portfolio and a site for my art studio, to a gallery of generic brown-haired anime boys and a landing page for my cat. And I was able to make such a diverse array of sites because of Squarespace's diverse array of templates, which is just impressively massive. Whether you need a landing page, a blog, an online store, a portfolio, it doesn't matter. They have a template that will be perfect for you to build from, and you can tailor those templates to meet your individual needs easily and smoothly by using Fluid Engine, their blessing of a drag-and-drop editing system that lets you customize and change every aspect of your site in the most user-friendly way possible. possible. And that includes turning it into a fully functional online store, something that Squarespace makes easy by offering e-commerce and print-on-demand integration, and even letting you sell exclusive content behind a paywall in members-only spaces. Anything you need your site to do or be, Squarespace can help you bring it to life with ease with their vast array of templates and tools. And you can find out yourself by going to squarespace.com/DuchessCelestia, linked in the description, and use code DuchessCelestia for 10% off your first domain purchase. Thank you so much to Squarespace for sponsoring today's video, and please go check them out. All that out of the way, let's get into the video. Before we look at how social media gets artists addicted to art, we first have to examine its effects on our self-esteem. That is, after all, the basis for the addiction in many, many ways. The desire to have our work be seen and appreciated is very closely intertwined with our self-esteem as artists, because in many ways we base our own judgments of whether or not our art is good on whether or not our peers say it is. Whether or not that's a healthy approach, that's hard to say. I mean, obviously we should make art with the intention of pleasing ourselves, not others, and we should decide whether we like it based on our own preferences and criteria, not whether or not other people like it. But there's value in the validation that we feel from others seeing it and appreciating it and telling us it's good. And it's natural for us to seek that out and indulge our urge to share our work with others and feel better about it in doing so. When you put so much effort, love, and passion into it, of course you feel a sense of accomplishment and affirmation from having it seen. This only becomes a problem if we allow the opinions and approval of others to define our own views on our art, leaving our entire artistic self-esteem in their hands. The goal should be to find a healthy balance in which you're able to enjoy your art regardless of what anyone else thinks of it, or whether they see it at all, but still allow yourself to seek and enjoy the validation that comes from sharing it with them anyway. Having said that, I also have to acknowledge that most of us haven't found that healthy balance, and struggle regularly not to let whether or not other people like our work define whether or not it's good in our eyes. It's hard, and it's even harder when social media becomes a factor because it allows us to effectively measure how much others like our work in real time by quantifying their approval in the form of engagement. We can actively and constantly monitor how much approval our art gets with real-time numbers, making it infinitely easier to lose that healthy self-esteem balance and instead begin defining a good art piece as one that got a lot of likes. If you draw two pieces that you don't post and you're trying to decide which one you like more, you'll make that decision based on your evaluation of their individual quality and personal preferences. If you post them and now suddenly one has 100 likes and one has 2, it's hard not to let that influence how you feel about them. Even if you otherwise would have preferred and felt good about the piece that got 2 likes, now you're questioning how good it really is and if you should start drawing less like that and more like the one that got 100 likes. And suddenly your self-esteem as an artist is inextricably intertwined with your social media engagement. You aren't just seeking the validation that comes from having your work be seen and appreciated. You're dependent on it being seen to feel good about it. And that's reflected by the wider community because the mentality has been so widely accepted that practically everyone shares it, to the point that artists with higher follower counts are viewed as better and more legitimate than artists with lower ones by way of that number alone. So now we have a bunch of artists gradually coming to associate self-esteem with social media engagement, who think their art's only good if it gets likes. That's problematic and worrying enough in and of itself. But we still have to factor in that it's overwhelmingly difficult to actually get those likes in the first place, because it's not like having good art is enough for social media platforms to push it to a real audience that'll give them. As I've already mentioned, social media for artists is effectively an online gallery in which any and all art posted there can be displayed without any barrier of entry or curation, which is obviously a wonderful thing. But because anyone can post their work with almost no restrictions and have it displayed for the world to see, that means there's a lot of it. Social media is completely oversaturated with the art of hundreds of thousands of artists around the world that are constantly posting more, positioning each individual one not as so much of a member of a community, but as a competitor against the others within it for the attention and likes of anyone who might scroll past it. And with so much art for the average social media user to scroll past, it feels almost impossible to create work that stands out from the rest of it enough to motivate them to look at yours, much less engage with it. And there's no shortage of pressure to make them engage with it, because that's the only way the algorithm will push it to more people. Social media does allow us the opportunity to let our work be seen and appreciated, but only for a few hours after you post it. According to an IT company's research, the lifespan of what you post on Twitter is just 18 minutes before it's no longer pushed to your followers and is replaced by the millions of other pieces of content that others have posted since, unless it's engaged with enough during that time to be picked up by the algorithm and promoted further. I don't know how accurate that still is now that it's X and everything is incomprehensible and inconsistent, but posts still definitely have a very short life in which, unless they're picked up by the algorithm, which no one understands by the way, they're buried shortly after being shared. All platforms are different, but most do operate that way to some degree. So now we have artists who have unhealthy relationships with their work because they've come to associate its quality with how much engagement it gets online, being forced to seek that engagement on platforms that are so oversaturated that it sets them up not to be able to get it unless the the ever-changing and never-explained algorithms decide, seemingly at random, to promote them. So what do? Well, some get so demotivated that they give up altogether, but the ones that don't are now faced with the insurmountable challenge of figuring out the nebulous algorithm and tailoring their work and how they post it to try to please it. And while most of those algorithms are so unclear and constantly changing that we have no idea how to do that most effectively, the one thing we do know for sure is that they favor consistency. Most social media algorithms have one thing in common, and it's that they reward very frequent, consistent posting. Now, that's one thing for non-artist social media users, whose version of making content to post is usually just taking a selfie or a photo of their cat, something that's done in a few minutes tops. And I don't mean to minimize photography as an art form when I say that, to be clear. Taking a good photo requires skill and effort, as does photo editing. But social media doesn't really require the photos to be good if the subject matter is engaging, and while some do put that extra effort into making them good anyway, it's not necessarily, well, necessary. So for the average social media user, algorithms rewarding frequent posting isn't that big of a problem, because the posts themselves don't require a significant amount of time or effort for them to make. So it's not difficult for them to make a lot of them and satisfy that frequent, consistent schedule requirement. Artists don't have that luxury, because the content that we post on social media is, well, our art. Some of us do post personal photos alongside that art, but for the most part, the content that we're sharing is art that we've likely spent much longer making than someone who took a photo. The algorithm was designed and tailored to suit those who are able to post frequently because their photos don't require a lot of time and effort to take and edit. So artists who have to spend significantly longer making what they're posting are at quite an unfair disadvantage. Our posts of art pieces take us hours and hours to finish, and are competing with photos that take minutes, and we're expected to create them at the same rate if we want a real chance at getting them seen. Yes, we have options. We can post works in progress rather than just finished work, we can post doodles. We don't just have to post exclusively finished art that takes forever, but finished art does usually do the best, and even messy doodles and sketches still take a lot more time than just taking a photo. So there's still immense pressure to be creating and finishing as much art as possible just to have something to post. And I'm sure you can see how that pressure can have a litany of negative effects on an artist's relationship with their work. They're already facing pressure to create art that's popular rather than what they really want to make, because it'll get more likes, and they've come to believe that those likes are what decide whether or not their art is good. Now they're also facing pressure to make as much of it as possible, as quickly as possible. Quality becomes less important than quantity, something that often ends up with their art either getting worse or at the very least stagnating. The subject matter you draw and the style you draw it in become heavily influenced by what's popular and what you think people will want to see rather than your own personal preferences and interests. And most relevantly, the immense, overbearing pressure to always have new art to post, usually at least once a week, turns its creation into an obligation. You're not making art and then posting it, you're making art so you have something to post, because God knows you need to have something to post. Your self-esteem as an artist is dependent on how many likes those posts get, and the only way to have a chance at getting them is to be making as much art as possible. And before you know it, you're addicted to art. You're spending all of your time making it, and not necessarily because you even want to, but because you're also addicted to the validation you feel from posting it online, assuming that week's piece gets enough likes to sustain you. You're drawing constantly, but spending all of your time rushing through your work is eventually going to completely drain your creative process of anything valuable. So drawing constantly isn't even fun anymore. Many artists end up burning out from that addiction, and those that don't and manage to maintain the grind often report very unhealthy relationships with art in which they no longer enjoy making it but feel like they have to, and feel overwhelming anxiety when it comes time to post it because so much of their self-esteem is hanging in the balance. After all, the number of likes it gets within 18 minutes of being posted to Twitter defines whether or not the hours upon hours of work that went into it prior to that paid off. They're addicted to making and posting it, but both making and posting it become thoroughly miserable experiences. To conform to a system that was designed for content, we have no choice but to start viewing our art as just that, not art, but content. Social media commodifies art as a product to be delivered to an audience with increasingly short attention spans by an algorithm that almost always dooms it to be scrolled past and forgotten, and it convinces us that its value is determined by how successfully our work manages to beat a system that was designed to put it at a disadvantage. And every single aspect of our creative process and relationship with art is influenced and corrupted by that, from the type of art we make to how often we make it to why we make it at all. Social media is designed to be addictive, and it has very effectively achieved that goal. But for artists, it's not just social media we get addicted to. Because our social media presence is based on our art, we have to get addicted to that too. We're addicted to the validation of likes that our self-esteem becomes dependent on, and we're addicted to making art so that we can have something to post as often as physically possible. That is, of course, only if we let ourselves fall victim to that artist to addict social media pipeline. Because we don't have to. Social media is an excellent tool, and it's completely possible for us to use it without letting it use us. It's not easy, it requires constant effort and self-control, and it sometimes means sacrificing engagement for mental health, but it's possible. What's most important when it comes to maintaining a healthy relationship with social media and not falling victim to art addiction as a result of it is, in my opinion, introspection. The biggest reason social media succeeds at getting us addicted to making and posting art is that it intertwines itself with our self-esteem. If we didn't rely on likes to inform our opinion on whether or not our work was good, we wouldn't feel like we need social media to such an addictive degree. I think one possible solution to separate our self-esteem from our art would be to view our art as separate from the content that it becomes when posted. Decide whether it's good based on our assessment of it before posting it, and then decide whether it as a piece of content is good based on our assessment of the post's performance. Because there is value in measuring your social media analytics and comparing each individual post's performance, so long as you're factoring in more than just the art those pieces contain, which is precisely the distinction that I want to emphasize when I explain the logistical problem with equating likes with art quality. Whether a post does well does not entirely come down to whether the art it contains is good. Its performance is also influenced by whether or not the subject matter is popular, the time at which it's posted, the hashtags you used, how heavily you promoted it, whether your posting schedule was consistent when you posted it, whether it appeals to your target demographic, even the brightness of the colors used. I could go on for a very, very long time. My point is that there are a lot of factors that contribute to whether or not a post is picked up by the algorithm enough to allow it a chance to receive engagement. And because of that, it's not like every post you share gets an equal shot at that. Comparing each of your art posts and measuring which art is better based on how well those posts performed makes the false assumption that each post was on an even playing field in which they were eligible to receive the same amount of attention, and one received less because it wasn't as good as another. Whereas in reality, what's more likely is that one received less because it was posted at a bad time, didn't use as effective of tags, wasn't as popular of a character, or fell victim to a myriad of other contributing factors. Yes, maybe the quality of it played a part, but certainly not the only part. If you want to prioritize social media growth, comparing posts based on those factors and analytics can be really helpful, because you can optimize when and how you post your art to boost your numbers. But that should be mindfully approached as an analysis of your art as content, not as art. When you compare two pieces as art to establish which one you like better or is artistically better, likes should not be a factor, at least not a major one. I realize that that's easier said than done when those likes are right there and you can't just pretend you don't see them, which is why I personally recommend taking some time to establish how you feel about your work before you post it. Do you feel like it's an improvement upon your previous work? Do you like how it turned out? Answer those questions before you post it, and remind yourself of the answers after posting it when you feel the number of likes it gets influencing how you feel about it. Some recommend staying off of social media for the first few hours after posting your art so you don't get obsessive with watching its numbers, which I strongly agree with if you can. There's no actual value in looking at a post's analytics for the first few hours anyway. If you're approaching social media healthily and without associating your artistic self-esteem with how well your art does when posted, the only reason to even look at your likes at all is to check your analytics so that you can see, purely from a marketing perspective, how you can improve your content's performance in the future. And if that is what you're doing, there's no real benefit to checking within the first few hours anyway, because you only get a full picture of the valuable, relevant information after the post's been up for like a week. Yes, it's relevant to see how the post performed within the first few hours compared to the first few days, but you can look at the analytics for that time period specifically at any point. So why not look at it when you have a full week's worth of information so you can see when and how quickly engagement dropped off? There's no real reason to check closely on how many likes your art is getting directly after posting it if you're not letting your self-esteem depend on that number. And if you are, then watching it obsessively will almost always do nothing but hurt you. It's obviously completely up to you, and you don't have to take a social media break after posting, but I do think it's good advice to at least try out if you're currently struggling with social media-based art addiction. It's also good because of how it pertains to my next point, perspective. We get addicted to making art because we're addicted to posting it, so we make more to have something to post. But what do we actually get from posting it? Whenever you post your art, ask yourself why you want to, what you're gaining, emotionally or otherwise, from posting it online that you wouldn't have if you didn't. If what you're getting is self-esteem and validation because you're relying on how many likes it gets to determine whether or not it's good, stop and reevaluate your relationship with social media and how healthy it really is for you. If you're getting the joy of sharing something you're proud of with your peers, that's great. Focus on that joy and not the number of likes it gets, because you can feel it regardless of that number. If you're using social media to build an audience and you're getting progress towards that out of posting your art, then yes, likes matter, but it's then important to make the art content distinction that I mentioned earlier. In all cases though, there's still no reason to be monitoring your post's performance within the first few hours, and the longer you wait to look at those numbers, the less you'll come to associate likes with the quality of your work. Because let's be honest, you can consciously say, I won't let how many likes this piece gets affect how I feel about it, all you want, but there's inevitably always going to be some small part of you that does get affected by that number anyway. That association is always going to be there in some capacity. What's important is that we actively try to minimize its impact on our self-esteem as much as we can, because minimizing that means minimizing our addiction to art and its posting, too. After all, if social media gets us addicted to art by getting us addicted to the validation of our self-esteem through posting it, lessening our association between social media and self-esteem will subsequently make us less addicted. Ultimately, by its very nature, social media is designed to be addictive. God, take a shot every time I say addicted or addictive. And it achieves that not by getting you addicted to the platforms themselves, but the content that you're posting and viewing on them. And when what you're posting is art, it can be very easy for the addiction to posting it to spread to the addiction to making it, because of the immense pressure to be posting as often as possible. And eventually, that can have some incredibly detrimental effects on every aspect of your relationship with art, often leading to burnout, low self-worth, anxiety, and so much more. But with introspection, discipline, thoughtfulness, and effort, we can minimize social media's power over us and our work, and keep using it as the effective tool it is without letting it corrupt something we love. It's not easy, and I don't think that association between likes and art's quality ever completely goes away. I still find myself scrolling through the like counts of my art to see what people liked most, and feeling like that means those pieces were the best, regardless of how I feel about them. And I still feel the urge to draw more like those pieces and less like the ones that underperformed, not because of my personal preference, but because of the part of my brain that tells me the underperforming ones were worse. What matters is that we confront and challenge those thoughts when we have them, and minimize the impact we allow them to have on our relationship with art. What we draw, how we draw it, how often we draw it, or whether we like it. In doing so, we also reduce the power that social media has to get us addicted to art. It still kind of has its claws in us when it comes to the algorithm side of things, of course, because if we do want to build audiences, we do generally have to be posting pretty often. But even if we do have to draw more than we'd like to keep up with that, keeping the other negative impacts of social media in check can keep that from becoming an addiction. Yes, there's still pressure to make art just to post, but at least you won't have the added pressure of posting it also meaning the addictive validation of it getting a lot of likes, or the crushing blow to your self-esteem of it not getting a lot of likes. Social media can be an excellent tool for artists. We just need to use it more than it uses us, and make sure not to let it take away what we love about art by reducing it to nothing more than content. Thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed today's video. Special thank you as always to channel members Cafe Soleil, Joseph Solomon, TC Pratt, Art of Amethyst Fable, Zelda Deverak 42, Abyss Reborn, Haruki Kyle, King Good James, Cutie Sailor Lovely, and Justice for Asterion, as well as patrons Batman, Kyle Lowe, Blue Swanson, Cora Fear, Jamisha Walker, Elengshi, Kinyan, Crazy Asar, Gentong, Grace Nick Xavier, MG, Flaw Mage, TC Pratt, Finn, Grim Spectre, Celine Merriman, Ash, Eldritchia, The Stray Dog, Ulura, Greg Noble, Dekagon, Jenny Chan, Captain Reku, Ryan M. Williams, Catbus, Alec Reinekainen, Mac, Lucia Majiki, Selena Beebe, Electamike, Prydave, Totally Shogun, and Insomniac Sleep Schedule, and I'll see you in the next one.